Discover the hidden truth, what 10,000 Viking raids revealed about women's incredible resilience. Sarah knelt in the dust of her late grandmother's attic, the musky air thick with neglect, as she unearthed a forgotten journal. Its worn leather cover seemed to thrum beneath her fingertips, almost alive with the secrets of a past untold. As she flipped open the cracked pages, words flooded her mind, tales of a Viking warrior, a woman who wielded a sword with fierce loyalty and unbroken spirit. Those stories felt like a jolt to her very soul, awakening a flicker of bravery she thought had long been extinguished in her monotonous life as a nurse in a small, economically challenged town. Every day was a relentless cycle of exhaustion. The moment Sarah slipped on her scrubs, she was swallowed by the demands of the hospital, her identity crammed beneath the weight of shifting responsibilities and bills piling perpetually on the kitchen counter. The steady stream of patients didn't just drain her physically, it dimmed her dreams and whispered constantly of her invisibility, weaving a fabric of doubt about her worth. In those scrubs, she labored fiercely, yet her achievements were muted by an undercurrent of skepticism toward her contributions. As she read more of her ancestors' tales, a familiar nagging voice echoed within her, "You're not enough." The unyielding expectations from her colleagues, who often overlooked her expertise in favor of the men around her, mirrored the haunting stories of women cast aside in history. Sarah's heart raced, fueled both by the empowerment she felt from the Viking words yet tethered to the fear of alienation from her peers. Would the fight for recognition push them away? Would they label her ambitious, selfish, even delusional? The weight of the dilemma tightened in her chest like a vice. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The entry sparked a furious fire in Sarah's heart, a desire to confront not just her shortcomings but the systemic bias woven into the fabric of her workplace. Each word became a rallying cry, urging her to defend herself and advocate for her fellow nurses. Yet, the thought of standing before her supervisors, demanding acknowledgement, sent waves of nausea crashing into her stomach. As she paced her bedroom, the silent judgment of her coworkers loomed, whispering accusations of hubris. It was anxiety mixed with a strong determination, as thoughts of Timmy's future surged through her mind. Would confronting her superiors jeopardize the stability she worked tirelessly to maintain for him? A confrontation loomed on the horizon, and with it, the moments spent grappling with her own inadequacies became more pronounced. Her hands trembled slightly as she imagined the boardroom, the sea of eyes glaring her way, judgment hanging heavy in the balmy air. Each step forward felt perilous, confronting the status quo meant risking everything she held dear. Would she harness the strength of that Viking warrior, or be crushed under the weight of her unspoken fear? As tension pulsed through her, one question remained agonizingly clear: would this declaration of her existence shatter her old life, or would it carve a new path toward the recognition and justice she so desperately sought? The air felt thick with uncertainty as Sarah stood on the precipice of her decision, courage battling fear within her heart, uncertain of what might come next. The morning sun filtered into Sarah's kitchen, casting fingers of light across the cluttered table, but the warmth did little to ease the chill settling in her bones. She stared at the remnants of breakfast, her son Timmy already off to school, and felt a weight in her chest that felt heavier than the stack of bills waiting on the counter. Her thoughts were consumed by the confrontation looming ahead, the one she'd prepared for, rehearsed in the silence of her own mind, yet never fully embraced. What would her colleagues say when they heard her voice cut through the usual monotony of the staff room? The imagined sneers and whispers curled around her resolve, threatening to undo the courage that had ignited in her after reading the tales of Viking women. The anger she felt towards the collective disregard for women's contributions in her field swelled and swelled until there was barely room for anything else. She had spent years in the shadows, partaking in a culture that defined success only through the lens of traditional hierarchies. That day she wore her scrubs like armor, determined to channel the spirit of her ancestor. Each stitch hummed with purpose, yet her reflections were darkened by the memories of her peers robbing her of recognition. Simmering resentment intertwined with an urge to scream at every unjust remark she had overheard, and how easy it was for her to remain silent, tucked away in the safety of compliance. At the hospital, Sarah moved through the halls like a specter, passing by the faces of those who stole her accomplishments and fluffed their own egos with borrowed merit. The steady rhythm of the place beat against her, each patient's need a pulse that quickened the pace of her heart. Yet, as she worked, she felt that familiar constriction around her throat. Questions swirled in her mind: were they blind to her skills? Did they not recognize the countless nights she sacrificed for those in need? The briefings were always a festering ground of self-importance. If she spoke up, the laughter could drown her before she ever had a chance. But each passing moment from the past day echoed back her reflection, an indefinable warrior left untested. The narrative of her Viking ancestor rolled like thunder inside her. To be forgotten is to live half a life. As the lunch hour came, Sarah seized the moment. She steered towards the break room. In the clatter of trays and muffled conversations, she centered herself. This was her moment, not an isolated battle, but the first strike against the oppressive weight of a long-standing culture. She approached the group gathered around the circular table. It felt as if she had walked onto a battlefield. Self-doubt, fear, and heightened adrenaline were the parameters. "Can I have everyone's attention?" The words emerged, stronger than she anticipated. Murmurs settled as her colleagues turned towards her, eyes prying into her rising flame of determination. "I want to talk about our roles as nurses and to consider how we can push against the systemic biases that persist in our environment," she continued, her pulse echoing in her ears. Sarah's cheeks flushed with a mix of vulnerability and defiance. "We need to acknowledge each other's contributions and redefine what success looks like in our field." Every sentence felt monumental, yet the doubt that had accompanied her into the room forced Sarah to glance around, searching for that murmur of mockery. Instead, she met the unwavering gaze of a few. She could see the spark that mirrored her own needs for validation, the hunger for recognition sparkling in their eyes. As the conversation flowed, she found herself invigorated. Each voice that joined hers rang truer than the last, and for the first time, she began to feel the collective power of women rising together like the warriors she had read about. The exhilaration of unity was intoxicating, suggesting that perhaps her efforts could inspire a wave of change. But just as hope began to surge, a familiar voice cut through. A senior nurse, her direct competitor, challenged Sarah openly. "And what would you know about doing this? You've barely scratched the surface of what we endure out here." The tough battle Sarah had just begun to forge crumbled at its foundation. She could feel her initial thrill dissipate into the fray. Doubts clawed at her psyche. This was the real fight. Would she allow the ancient cynicism of the healthcare world to silence her once more? The moment pulled heavy, and she stood at an unexpected crossroads. What would she choose? Would she let this be her resurrection, or would she retreat? The air buzzed with anticipation, yet every passage felt suddenly uncertain. The time had come to face not just her colleagues but the deeper shadows of insecurity that threatened her very identity. Sarah blinked, momentarily taken aback by the challenge. Those words, heavy with condescension, echoed in her mind, but behind them lay an opportunity, an invitation to prove herself, not just to her peers, but to the self-doubt that had shadowed her for years. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to uncover truths that have long been ignored, she countered, channeling the resolve she felt stirring within her during her research. "I may not have walked in your shoes, but I saw the scars etched on the faces of our patients and felt the frustrations of my fellow nurses. We all share this struggle, and it's up to us to transform our individual experiences into something powerful." She steadied herself, feeling the heat of the collective gaze intensify. This was the moment she had prepared for, but now it felt rawer, more authentic. Holding the attention of her colleagues required vulnerability, the kind that exposed both her insecurities and her fierce commitment to advocate for change. Her competitor scoffed, and Sarah felt it, a surge of uncertainty coursing through her. Yet she pressed on, drawing from an inner reservoir she hadn't fully acknowledged before. Recognizing our shared strengths is the key to moving forward. It's not about individual accolades, it's about lifting each other as we navigate this demanding environment together. Pausing, she scanned the room, locking eyes with several nurses who leaned in, encouraging the discussion. That gesture ignited something inside her. We have the capacity to reshape how we are perceived and valued, she declared, her voice gaining steadiness. This isn't merely about us as individuals. It's about building a legacy for those who follow. Easier said than done, Sarah, the senior nurse retorted, clearly unfazed. You sound idealistic. What real steps do you propose? Just talking won't fix the issues we face every day. The challenge arrived like a charge in the atmosphere, and Sarah sensed the thin line she was walking. This wasn't just an argument about ideals, it was a call to action. Each heartbeat felt amplified as she contemplated her next move, the silence heavy with anticipation. Let's start by creating a mentorship program, she suggested, her voice clear and resolute. We can pair seasoned nurses with newcomers to foster collaboration, sharing knowledge and experiences that too often go unrecognized. It's a systematic way to dismantle the barriers we face. The silence that followed felt electric. Then she heard hesitant murmurs in agreement, which bloomed into discussion. Sarah's heart swelled as questions flew around the room. Who would be willing to lead the first session? How could they get this initiative off the ground? For the first time, she witnessed the impact of her words transform from theory to action, revitalizing the energy within the break room. Hope blossomed as it became clear that her colleagues, rather than resisting, were energized by the idea of collaboration. But just as enthusiasm filled the air, she felt the sharpness of a dagger piercing through. That same critical voice returned, and when will you find time for this, Sarah? Between shifts and responsibilities? Talk is cheap. A cold wave of self-doubt washed over her, challenging the newfound sense of camaraderie she had just sparked. Would they regard her as merely an idealist or hear the authenticity in her vision? For all her planning, the true test of her resilience stood before her. Time slowed as she grappled with her identity. Would she retreat into silence, or confront this derision head-on? In the depths of her anxiety, clarity emerged. Her silence had been a comforting prison, one she was no longer willing to inhabit. I will make the time, she asserted, her voice unwavering. But this has to be a shared effort. Together, we can reshape our environment into something conducive to growth and recognition, not just for ourselves, but for those to come. As her proclamation hung in the air, something shifted within her. A new determination ignited as she embraced her role as a changemaker. But even amidst the thrill of asserting her vision, a deeper fear loomed. What if change never materialized? A flicker of doubt lingered, intertwining with her firm resolve. This was just the beginning, and she sensed larger battles awaited, both among her colleagues and within her own heart. As they continued their discussion, a part of Sarah wondered whether this moment would turn out to be a turning point or just another fleeting spark easily extinguished by doubt and cynicism. Would she be able to navigate these conflicting tides, or would the old culture consume the new light she was trying to kindle? The stakes rose with every heartbeat. The reality of her journey weighed heavily on her shoulders, but the drive to challenge the status quo became her steadfast compass. This was no longer merely about recognition, it had become a mission for systemic transformation, a quest to reclaim the dignity that every nurse deserved. Real change required action, steadfastness, and resilience. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the real test lay just ahead, and with it, a decision that would define her newfound path. Would she have the courage to face it? The following days were a blur of energy, fear, and anticipation. Sarah immersed herself in the practical steps of launching the mentorship program. She spent her nights drafting emails, reaching out to potential mentors, and designing the framework that would guide their interactions. However, the thrill of taking initiative was marred by an undercurrent of anxiety. Each time she hit send on her outreach, a familiar voice whispered doubts about her capabilities. Despite her efforts to project confidence, the scrutiny of her colleagues weighed heavily upon her. Once the idea took root, discussions shifted from the potential benefits to the logistics of implementation. Sarah realized that her voice now echoed in the break room, yet it felt overshadowed by the scrutinizing glances. As the days turned into weeks, she observed the seasoned nurses who had initially dismissed her proposal. They began to nod in conversations, albeit begrudgingly. It was as if they were teetering on the edge of acceptance but perpetually held back by the specters of skepticism. On one particularly tense afternoon, Sarah found herself seated next to Jenna, a nurse known for her blunt honesty. Jenna didn't often hide her opinions, and Sarah braced herself for another round of criticism. "You think you can change anything?" Jenna asked, her tone a mix of exasperation and curiosity. "You really believe adding a bit of mentorship is going to make any difference at all?" The question hung in the air, laced with challenge. But there was something in Jenna's tone, something that hinted at curiosity rather than outright hostility. Sarah took a breath, feeling the weight of every glance from her coworkers. "Yes, I do. I believe sharing knowledge and experiences can change how we see ourselves and how we are seen by others." Jenna's eyebrows lifted slightly, intrigued despite herself. "In theory, sure. But this place hasn't changed in years. You really think it's that easy to reshape perspectives?" Sarah paused, reconsidering her response. "No, it won't be easy. But this is about planting seeds. If we invest time in one another, we may cultivate something much larger. If we don't try, nothing will ever change." A small silence settled between them where they both felt the unspoken weight of years of entrenched culture. Jenna appeared to ponder Sarah's words, and for the first time, Sarah felt that her argument might resonate with someone who had experience beyond her own. Determination surged within her. She didn't want to just plant seeds, she wanted to stand among her colleagues as a fellow gardener. "We've faced challenges before, and we've always found ways to adapt and survive. Imagine what we could do if we faced the future together, supporting one another instead of competing." The conversation blossomed unexpectedly as Jenna shared her memories of formidable challenges in the past, denying the long hours and demands placed on nursing staff, yet finding a tight camaraderie with those willing to push the envelope. Sarah seized this moment, encouraging her to weave those stories into the mentorship concept. As the days progressed, she felt a notable shift in her energy. Each successful interaction felt like a victory, fortifying her belief that change could occur. However, every time she saw doubt reflected in a peer's eyes or faced a dismissive comment, her resolve wavered briefly. Was she idealistic? Or was she simply daring to envision what others had deemed impossible? Willingness began to peek through just as resistance threatened to return. Those moments when her colleagues recognized the fragility and power of their shared resilience fed Sarah's ambition. But lingering doubts plagued her. What if she overstepped? What if the effort unraveled under scrutiny? Through the shared stories, Sarah uncovered latent competencies in herself, emerging as a facilitator rather than a mere advocate. She had instinctively become a catalyst, drawing on her peers' insights. Yet she remained aware of how easily the tides could turn against her vision. As she pinned another flyer for the upcoming mentorship meeting, the familiar pang of uncertainty returned. She realized she was about to confront her biggest fear, yet the vulnerability of her pursuit. The dreaded meeting loomed, and her mind raced through the potential scenarios. What if no one showed up? What if they ridiculed her effort? Suddenly, she was gripped by an urgent need to anchor herself in her quest for credibility, to forge a path despite any backlash. But at that moment, she also recognized something profound: the fear of failing could finally be consumed by her desire for transformation. Just as she was about to take a step back and rethink her approach, her phone buzzed with a message from Jenna, inviting her for a coffee to discuss their shared vision further. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Would their meeting serve as the guiding light she desperately sought, or would it unravel her vision and plunge her ambitions into darkness? The question loomed over her like a storm, forcing Sarah to confront a critical decision that could define the very essence of her initiative. Would she choose to embrace her fear, or allow the doubts to consume her aspirations? As Sarah entered the cafe, the aroma of rich coffee and baked pastries enveloped her, mingling with the pulse of quiet conversations around her. She spotted Jenna at a corner table, her expression unreadable. The lack of familiarity with the space momentarily exacerbated Sarah's anxiety, but she quickly shook it off, focusing instead on the potential for collaboration. "Hey," Jenna greeted, her tone surprisingly warm. "Thanks for meeting me. I was thinking about what you said the other day." A mixture of relief and trepidation coursed through Sarah. "Of course. I'm glad to have this chance to talk." They settled into conversation, easily transitioning from small talk into deeper discussions about the mentorship program. Sarah found herself animatedly discussing the ways in which mentorship could bridge the gaps in expertise and empathy within their workplace. Jenna listened intently, occasionally interjecting with her own insights and experiences, and Sarah noted how each shared moment peeled back layers of their professional facades. "I see what you mean about the seeds," Jenna said, her interest clearly piqued. "But how do you plan to sustain growth once they've been planted? How do you get everyone on board?" "Fair question." Sarah sensed this was more than idle curiosity, it was Jenna genuinely wanting to understand the framework of this initiative. "I'm envisioning a series of workshops where mentors and ments can engage in hands-on learning. Regular check-ins could help maintain accountability." She leaned forward slightly, tapping into the conviction she had built over the weeks. "I think it's about creating a culture where it's okay to ask for support." Jenna nodded, her brow furrowing in thought. Support is often perceived as a weakness here. It's hard to change the narrative when people are so ingrained in their roles. "Exactly," Sarah replied, the energy swelling within her. "But what if we redefine what it means to be supportive? We could focus on building relationships that emphasize shared growth rather than competition. By showing that vulnerability can coexist with strength, we can shift perspectives." At this point, Jenna's skepticism seemed to dissolve, replaced by cautious optimism. "You have a clear vision. Still, it sounds like it'll take time to shift mindsets. How will you handle pushback?" The question sent a wave of doubt through Sarah, but she was determined not to shy away. "I need to establish a clear line of communication. If I frame the program not just as an initiative but as a collective experience, maybe they'll see it as beneficial to everyone. Maybe even start to feel empowered by it." Empowerment isn't usually the first thing people think about with mentorship, Jenna observed, a hint of admiration creeping into her voice. "But you might be onto something. It could really spark a change." The two women continued discussing strategies, their conversation flowing like a river fed by newfound synergy. To Sarah's surprise, Jenna offered to help her with outreach, drawing on her established relationships to rally support. As they brainstormed, Sarah saw the potential for something larger than the program. She envisioned a community rooted in support rather than competition. This collaborative spirit invigorated her, pushing aside fears that had once paralyzed her. Instead of burdening herself with what could go wrong, she began to visualize what could flourish. Together, they crafted a fresh narrative for the initiative during their meeting, reflecting not just the desire for mentorship but for mutual growth designed to elevate every nurse's experience. However, as they concluded their meeting, a sudden realization struck Sarah. For all the enthusiasm bubbling up within her for the mentorship program, the impending meeting on Friday now loomed larger. What if Jenna's help wasn't enough? What if her passionate vision couldn't withstand the scrutiny of a larger audience? Her heart raced at the thought. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and Sarah understood that facing her colleagues and their doubts was only the beginning. She would have to summon all her newfound resolve to embrace the coming storm, ready to either defend her vision or adapt it in response to the challenges that could arise. Would she stand firm in her beliefs, or would the weight of skepticism collapse the foundation she had begun to build? As the week wound down, Sarah found herself unable to escape the gnawing anticipation of the upcoming meeting. Each tick of the clock resonated like a drumbeat in her mind, a constant reminder of the significance of the moment ahead. Her dreams were often invaded by vivid scenarios, her colleagues' critical gazes, their dismissive comments echoed in her ears like an unending anxiety loop. She could almost feel their skepticism pressing down upon her, suffocating her resolve. In an attempt to center herself, she turned to her journal. Writing had always been a refuge where she could articulate her thoughts without judgment. As she penned down her concerns, she became aware of how her language had shifted. What if they reject my vision? Gave way to what if they challenge it, leading to a better one? This subtle reframe sparked a flicker of determination within her. She realized this meeting could be a forging fire, a test to refine her plans and adapt them to the realities present at the institution. But even with this sense of clarity, she found herself mentally rehearsing the responses to every anticipated objection. One moment, she envisioned a boardroom full of supportive faces, ready to rally behind her initiative and of its potential benefits. The next, she saw her ideas being dismissed, felt the words rattling in her throat but never reaching her lips. Every inhalation filled with both hope and a steely resolve to withstand whatever would come her way. As Friday drew near, Sarah turned to Jenna for further guidance. Their conversations became sessions of sharpened focus, dissecting potential pushbacks and crafting responses tailored to each potential concern. Encouraged by Jenna's continued support, Sarah began to draw from the well of her professional experiences to bolster her proposals. It wasn't simply about mentorship. It was about fostering a work environment where vulnerability was a strength, a lesson drawn from her years of dealing with demanding patients and emotionally charged situations. On the eve of the meeting, Sarah laid awake, reflecting on her evolution over the past few weeks. The anxious girl who had once shied away from confrontation was now preparing to step onto a stage, ready to present her vision. Yet, amidst her anticipation, doubt still lingered, gnawing at the corners of her resolve. What would happen if the very colleagues she sought to uplift were unwilling or unable to recognize the value in what she was offering? With the dawn of Friday, Sarah dressed more intentionally than usual. The crispness of her uniform felt like armor. As she entered the conference room, the familiar clatter of voices faded. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the present. The room was filled with familiar faces, colleagues whose judgments she had often feared. Now it was time to show them the passionate advocate she had grown into. Sure, she could stumble in her delivery or face opposition, but she had resolved to view this as an opportunity to not only present an idea but to initiate a conversation. As she began, she noticed small nods of acknowledgement, a promise of engagement. Yet, just as she was warming to the message, the air shifted. David, a senior nurse known for his blunt criticism, leaned forward, eyebrows raised in scrutiny. "This sounds great, Sarah, but what's in it for us? Why should we invest time into something we're not even sure will work?" His challenge hung heavy in the air, a palpable wave of tension washing over her. Sarah's heart raced, a primal instinct to defend her vision clashing with a realization that perhaps this confrontation could be the catalyst needed for deeper dialogue. The moment had come to truly confront not just the skepticism she faced but the inner fears that had haunted her development. Would she play it safe or step boldly into the unknown? As she prepared to address his concerns, Sarah felt the weight of the stakes pressing down on her. In this moment, her growth and the fight for her vision woven tightly together like the seams of her uniform. Would she seize the day or retreat into the shadows of doubt? The silence in the conference room felt deafening. Sarah's pulse quickened as she looked around, taking in the sea of familiar faces betraying an array of reactions from curiosity to skepticism. In that instant, she wrestled with the undeniable truth that David's question had cut straight to the heart of her initiative. "What's in it for you?" she echoed, her voice steady yet laced with passion. This was not just about her vision, it was about inviting each of them into a dialogue, empowering them to see how they could be part of something significant. With renewed conviction, she addressed the room. "This isn't just my theory. It's a chance to innovate our practice and increase our efficiency while enhancing patient care. By collaborating, we'll refine this concept together into something that truly benefits us all." She sensed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. A few heads turned slightly, the tension loosening as her words hung in the air. But she'd yet to land the decisive point, the part that would convince them to abandon their reservations and step into the uncharted territory she proposed. Imagine, she continued, her breathing steady and deliberate, what it would look like if we embraced a mentorship model where everyone's skill set is not only valued but nurtured. It's about building a stronger team where everyone feels they can contribute and grow. Each sentence became a stepping stone, drawing her closer to breaking down their defenses. David's response was almost immediate, puncturing the air with his critical skepticism. Sounds great in theory, but we already have a heavy workload. How do you expect us to fit this in? The challenge sent a ripple of apprehension through Sarah, but she stood firm. She had anticipated such pushback and came prepared. That's exactly why this initiative is so crucial. By investing in our leadership capacities, we create a more efficient workflow that eases our individual burdens in the long run. Training each other helps us become faster problem solvers in our clinical work, ultimately benefiting our patients and ourselves. The dialogue ignited something in the room. Colleagues began exchanging glances, some leaning in, inquisitive sparks igniting within. Sarah's heart thudded, each beat driving her resolve deeper. This was what she had wanted, to create a discussion that felt inclusive, one where her colleagues had a stake in the outcome. As the conversation deepened, she noticed a flicker of resistance in the form of a young nurse who had initially sat quietly. But what if it doesn't work? What if we invest our time and the result is underwhelming? He asked, uncertainty lining his voice. And what if it does work? Sarah countered, an edge of assertiveness coloring her tone. Yes, we might fail, but isn't it better to try something new than to stay stagnant? Growth doesn't come without risk. The conversation took on a life of its own, pushing and pulling as thoughts were debated and ideas shared. Each challenge she faced was met with a newfound strength, each tug of war sharpening her responses and solidifying her authority in the discussion. By the time the meeting drew to a close, Sarah felt the weight of uncertainty begin to lift. She had survived the initial storm of skepticism. Yet, as gratitude and fatigue washed over her, one thought nagged persistently at the edges of her mind: had she truly convinced them, or merely scratched the surface of their apprehensions? As she exited the conference room, energized from the confrontation yet troubled by lingering doubts, she heard whispers behind her. They discussed her ideas, enthusiasm mingling with cynicism. The balances hung delicately, fragile yet vibrant. With each step down the corridor, Sarah felt her resolve crystallizing. She had taken the leap, but now it was time to truly show them the vision was more than just a series of presentations, it was a path toward transformation. The challenge had only just begun. With her next steps, she would have to unite their voices into a shared vision, overcoming the persistent echoes of doubt that had thrived in her absence. Would she manage to inspire confidence, or would the skepticism return to swallow her aspirations whole? The stakes had escalated. The battle for their hearts and minds loomed ahead, a test that would demand everything she had cultivated within herself. Sarah met the looming uncertainty with fierce determination. The next encounter would be vital in uncovering whether true collaboration could emerge from the ashes of skepticism. The following day, Sarah found herself in the break room, staring at the untouched mug of coffee cooling on the counter. The usual buzz of laughter and chatter felt muted in her ears. She replayed the meeting's highlights in her mind, wondering how much of her enthusiasm had translated to her colleagues. Were they still debating whether her vision amounted to genuine change, or were they merely humoring her in a moment of idealism? She turned to the window, watching outside as the trees swayed against a restless sky. Her thoughts spiraled, blurring the line between confidence and self-doubt. What had begun as a conversation about mentorship and collaboration now felt like the weight of an entire department rested on her shoulders. Determined to act, Sarah decided to approach her colleagues individually. There was a strategy in personal engagement she hoped would resonate better than a large meeting. It was time to cultivate relationships. Trust, she believed, could lead to collective progress. She started with Karen, a veteran nurse known for her no-nonsense attitude and respected opinions. Seizing the opportunity in the quiet of the late afternoon, Sarah knocked on her office door, welcoming herself in with a warm smile. "Karen, do you have a moment?" The invitation hung between them, an invitation to risk and possibility. "Sure, what's up?" Karen narrowed her eyes slightly, a hint of curiosity mingling with caution. "I wanted to talk about the ideas I shared in the meeting yesterday," Sarah said, nervously fidgeting with her notepad. "I really value your perspective and would appreciate your thoughts." Karen leaned back, folding her arms as if she was bracing for impact. "You know I'm not one to sugarcoat things." With a deep breath, Sarah nodded. "I'd expect nothing less. I'm ready for the honest feedback. What you're proposing sounds ambitious. The fact is we're stretched thin already. It's hard to see how this would fit in without making things messy," Karen replied, her voice steady, but a hint of vulnerability crept into her gaze. "It's easy to say we should collaborate more, but it takes real commitment from everyone." A rush of anxiety flared in Sarah, but she kept her resolve. "I understand that, and it's precisely why I think we need to invest in training each other. If we can lighten our individual loads by building a stronger team, isn't that worth the risk?" Karen considered this. "You're suggesting we take a leap of faith. I don't see how we convince everyone else. Not without a solid plan." The word stung, yet Sarah recognized that doubt was part of the process. "I might not have everything figured out yet, but the first step is to build a foundation. Each of your insights can shape how we develop this further." A silence fell between them, rich with unspoken thoughts. Sarah felt her chest tighten, uncertain of which way Karen would lean. "You know what, Sarah? You've got guts to come here and ask for input. Most would run from criticism." A subtle change in Karen's demeanor was palpable, a door cracked open. "I'll give it some thought. Just know that in practice, collaboration might challenge our traditional roles. It's a jump into the unknown." As they wrapped up the conversation, Sarah's heart swelled slightly. She had faced resistance but had engaged in honest dialogue, planting seeds of trust. It was a small victory, but one that signaled the beginning of building the community she longed to create. Feeling emboldened by that exchange, Sarah resolved to seek out more voices, weaving a tapestry of opinions and insights that would eventually lead to solidarity. There was something profound about the conversations taking root. Each meeting could reveal the hidden strengths and weaknesses within her team. However, as she prepared for the next conversation, Sarah was struck by an unsettling thought: what if she stumbled upon a hidden agenda among her colleagues, even amongst those she admired? What if their reluctance masked something deeper, something personal? The path before her was becoming more complex than she initially imagined. And just as she was piecing her approach together, she heard whispers echoing in the corridor. She had inadvertently opened a door to a potential scandal, a different kind of challenge looming that could shake the very foundation of their team's dynamics. Was she ready to confront not just skepticism, but potential treachery among those she sought to unite? The urgency rippled within her as the stakes escalated. It was not merely a matter of promoting collaboration anymore, it was a quest to uncover the truth that could either bind them closer together or tear them apart. As Sarah moved through the dimly lit hallways, a sense of urgency pushed her forward. The whispers had evoked a nervous energy, the kind of feeling that simmered just beneath the surface, urging her to dig deeper. She had always prided herself on her ability to read people, to sense when something felt off. Now, every hesitant glance exchanged between her colleagues felt amplified, each murmured joke glanced over her shoulder, loaded with unspoken meaning. She paused outside the staff lounge, where laughter spilled out like a beacon of misplaced normalcy. With her heart pounding, she recalled Karen's words about commitment and the challenges of collaboration. Would her colleagues resist her pursuit of honesty if it meant confronting their own shortcomings? Or worse, what if they had their own motives? Sarah pushed the door open, the jovial atmosphere abruptly drawing her attention. Inside, a small group had gathered, and for a moment, the fear of facing accusations held her back. She stood against the wall, absorbing the dynamic among them, a delicate balance of laughter intertwined with tension. The room felt like a stage set for conflict, yet here she was, wanting to pull back the curtain. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, ready to break the ice. "Hey everyone," she said, forcing a lightness into her tone that masked the heaviness in her heart. "I'd love to get your thoughts on some ideas I'm working on to improve our department. It's been on my mind since yesterday's meeting." The room immediately hushed, and she became acutely aware of their eyes assessing her. Sam, a shrewd young nurse known for his sharp wit, raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you're ready for that, Sarah? Last I checked, jumping in with ideas often leads to a quick exit." A ripple of laughter followed, but Sarah felt the sharp bite of critique beneath the jest. It stung, but she resolved to meet it head-on rather than retreating like a deer in headlights. "Maybe. But isn't taking risks the only way to grow? I want to hear from all of you. What obstacles do you see in pushing for more collaboration?" Her directness led to a moment of quiet contemplation. She could sense the tension shift slightly. A colleague named Megan broke the silence. "Honestly, I think a lot of us are just worried about adding more to our plates. We're stretched thin already. How do we make sure no one falls through the cracks?" It was a valid point, one she had anticipated. "I get it. But if we project ourselves better together, don't you think we could actually alleviate some of that pressure? What if we reassess our roles and streamline responsibilities? We don't have to do everything alone." As she spoke, she watched faces flicker between skepticism and intrigue. A part of her felt empowered to lean into their concerns, to reflect their hesitations back at them. "Yeah, but that sounds like a lot of changes," chimed in a quieter voice. It was Jenna, usually reserved but respected. "What about loyalty? Some of us have been here for years, and switching things up could upset the team dynamics." Loyalty. The word hung in the air like a call to arms. What was loyalty if it stood against progress? "I value loyalty, Jenna," Sarah responded thoughtfully. "But loyalty shouldn't be a barrier to improvement. If we can create a better environment for everyone, doesn't that deepen our commitment to each other?" The discussion began to evolve, moving from skepticism toward genuine contemplation. As Sarah navigated the conversation, it became clear that cracks existed not just in cooperation, but within their shared history. Her initial fears about possible treachery faded slightly. This wasn't a group of antagonists, but rather a collective struggling with fear. Yet, the deeper they delved, the more curiosity prompted her. What were the true reasons that lay beneath their hesitance? Was there more to discover beyond the surface tensions? Just as excitement bubbled up within her, the door swung open with an unexpected force. The abrupt entry cut through their dialogue, shifting the atmosphere. It was Matt, the department head, with an expression that suggested he carried the weight of secrets, not the kind she had hoped to unveil, but the kind that could shatter the fragile trust they had been building. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said sharply, eyes darting to the group. "Now." Every ounce of encouragement she felt moments ago vaporized in an instant. She had opened a door to discovery, and now, it threatened to lead to confrontation rather than collaboration. With the unexpected challenge hanging heavy between them, Sarah's heart raced as she turned toward Matt, the realization dawning on her. The moment of truth arrived, and it appeared she would have to face not just her colleagues' fears, but the potential consequences of secrets held close. Would she have the strength to uncover the truth, or would her ambitions lead her down a precarious path? Sarah's heart pounded as she stood on the precipice of confrontation with Matt. The atmosphere had shifted, curiosity among her colleagues brimmed with uncertainty. The whispers that had persisted in the hallways and the camaraderie she was striving to build all felt fragile now, threatened by the sudden weight of authority creeping back into her world too soon. "Can't it wait?" she asked, using every ounce of steadiness she could muster. "I'm in the middle of a discussion with the team." Her mind raced, torn between the urgency of her initiative and the authority looming before her. Matt's gaze didn't waver. "It's important, Sarah. Please." There was an edge in his voice, one that stirred the ancient currents of fear and doubt she had been battling. With a deep breath, she took a step towards him. "I'll be right back," she assured her colleagues, ignoring the sudden murmur that rippled through the room. The resolve she had cultivated through days of uncertainty and conversations began to instill confidence within her. As she followed Matt down the corridor, each step felt heavier until they reached an empty office. Once inside, he turned to face her, the door closing with a resolute thud, a sound that echoed the finality of impending judgment. "Your meeting today, there were concerns about your approach," he said, a tinge of seriousness in his tone that sent shivers through her. "There are some among the staff who believe you're stirring the pot without appreciating the consequences." "Concerns?" she faltered, feeling the air drain from her. "Are they worried about collaboration or about losing power?" There it was, the specter of truth she had feared, the fragments of the toxic culture she was trying to dismantle rearing their ugly heads. "That's not for you to question," he countered sharply. "The only truth that matters is the stability of this team. Don't mistake ambition for recklessness." "Ambition?" Her voice grew firm as her eyes locked onto his. "Isn't it reckless to ignore the need for change? To remain stagnant while the world around us demands accountability and compassion?" Matt shifted uncomfortably, clearly wrestling with the conversation. It was evident now the tension she sensed among her colleagues had roots anchored deeper than individual emotions. They were aligned under an unspoken fear of hierarchy, a fear she wanted to overcome. "I didn't come here to debate," he said after a moment, his tone softening. "Just know you're under scrutiny. What you're considering could lead to backlash. The previous leadership didn't handle shifts well, and I'm merely warning you." "Then consider this my declaration," Sarah replied, seizing the moment to infuse strength into despair. "I'm not backing down. We need to acknowledge each other's contributions. There's no transformation without acknowledgement." A flicker of realization crossed his face, and Sarah seized it. "You can either join me in embracing this change or let the fear dictate your decisions. You've seen the culture of silence at play. We need to break free of it, or we remain trapped in an endless cycle." The lingering silence was long and thick, pushing against her resolve. Matt looked away, contemplative. "Change isn't easy, Sarah. I empathize with your mission, but you must tread lightly." Before he could say more, Sarah interjected. "Then let us steer together. I need your support in this. Together we could build a culture that leans into vulnerability, not away from it. The staff respects you. Help me help everyone." He met her gaze, uncertainty mingling with understanding. "If you're willing to face the fallout, I'll consider backing you," he finally spoke, and that single acknowledgement sparked a rush of adrenaline through Sarah's veins. With a newfound clarity, Sarah returned to the staff lounge, her resolve fortified. As she re-entered the space, the conversations hushed, replaced by curious eyes searching for answers. "Everything all right?" Jenna's voice sliced through the tension, and Sarah intentionally softened her stance, ready to engage. "Let us continue where we left off," Sarah said. A layer of determination settling in her voice that hadn't been there moments before. "Building a mentorship program is just the beginning. I want to hear all your opinions, every single one matters here, especially those of you who are hesitant." As the realization washed over her colleagues, they began to speak. An energetic dialogue emerged, layers of doubt transformed into ideas, a spirit of collaboration ignited anew. Sarah found herself leading the conversation, those early whispers of skepticism morphing into mutually beneficial discourse. In that moment, she understood something fundamental had shifted, not just in her colleagues but within herself. Days later, along with Matt's tentative support, they officially began rolling out the mentorship program, the first real anchor in a culture of change. Each meeting uncovered commitments beyond what Sarah had dared to hope. Titles became less significant, as her colleagues volunteered to foster progress, tapping into their collective knowledge to support one another. Sarah felt more empowered than ever, her dream transforming from an idealistic ambition into tangible action. Each new participant brought insights that reshaped not only the program, but the entire department. She invited conversations that once would have been silenced, forging connections that transcended status and insecurity. The culmination of this journey relied on more than implementing a program. It became a testament to what solidarity alongside courage looked like in practice. She saw personal growth reflected in the eyes of every nurse stepping into mentorship, signaling that they were willing to shatter norms. Today, as Sarah stood addressing her peers with growing confidence, she felt like the Viking warriors whose stories had sparked this awakening. No longer consumed by self-doubt, each word she spoke echoed strength, spurring those around her. Together we forged a new chapter, she declared, the air thick with acceptance and hope. This transformation isn't just for us, it's a legacy for the future of nursing, one where every voice counts. In the unified applause that followed, she realized this was the culmination of her journey. The fears once suffocating her aspirations dissipated, replaced by the unmistakable growth achieved through resilience and unity. Every ounce of determination had been validated through every piece of commitment articulated within the walls of her once suffocating workplace. With tangible change unfolding before her, Sarah was ready to embrace all that lay ahead. Never again would she shy away from using her voice. She had not only conquered the silence, but she instilled a new narrative with unwavering authenticity. This was her moment of achievement, a reflection of her transformation fueled by strength and unity. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.